Good morning. I want to speak a bit further about AI, artificial intelligence. Today will be a light one. Then there's two more areas before we actually move into the commercial applications, because ultimately we are marketers, many of us, and that's really what's interesting to us. Suffice to say, marketing is actually one of the simple applications of AI. It's infinitely more serious when we look at other areas. The three areas that we need to discuss is, the first one is nonverbal data, which is a particularly problematical area, but which I think increasingly we've grasped. I'm not saying we've fully grasped, but we are in the process of grasping it. The second one is the non-observable data, where we almost have to start relying upon cause and effect. I think that's in fact how the first black hole was discovered by Professor Stephen Hawking. And that's a particularly complicated one where I can't give you definitive answers to it, but it's important that we're conscious of it. And then there is a third one where I can give you ample examples, and that is the introduction of algorithms that have either something or nothing to do with the existing data set. I'm not going to talk about the accuracy of data. I think we've read enough about it. I'm not going to talk about data privacy, because those things to me are constraints on the application of data that any data practitioner, frankly, now and in the past should be conscious of. When we talk about nonverbal data, we know that when Walt Disney started his animation series, leading up to the first full-length animation movie that nearly bankrupted him, Snow White, a lot of it had to do with the facial expressions and the capability of characters that are not human to appear to be human. In other words, to have the attributes that you and I will have when we communicate to people, attributes that could either mean that you perceived as friendly, unfriendly, threatening, flirty. We can mention the entire list of potential emotional reflections. In a very playful way, I think after years and years of work, because it took Disney a long time, hence why it nearly bankrupted him, and it basically alienated him from his brother for, in a way, the rest of his life. And him having that wonderful meeting with the Bank of America board that I still think must go down down as one of the ultimate discussions between a real entrepreneur with vision and a corporate board that's never done anything risky in their lives. In the playing with Mickey Mouse and various characters like that, it became apparent that certain elements, like the size of the eyes, the way in which a character would behave, his body parts, would ascribe a certain set of attributes to that entity that would humanize it to the point where it is in fact a human, albeit in an entirely different visual framework. Now, today it's of course much, much easier, because if we talk about, with our eyes, maybe unobservable data, much of the unobservable data will be AI, and that's a hugely important aspect of it, that will observe certain attributes and certain elements in the way in which people relate and speak to one another, classify them in certain ways, and thereby, by combinations, reflect a certain attitude, a certain way of life, a certain perception, showing that you're in love, showing that you fell out of love, showing aggression, showing non-aggression, showing excitement, joking. A lot of that will be stuff that we may, as people, take for granted. But AI has the inherent intelligence that it can review and look at those component parts and in milliseconds deduce the fact that this is actually an element that reflects the following kind of human attribute that makes people like it or dislike it. We all know the silly example that cats are the most popular on videos and TikTok and Instagram and every other social medium. It's not, I think, something that many of us would have thought right in the beginning, but now we know that cats hold that record. I think in a very similar way, AI has the ability to read signs that may take us quite a lot longer to read as humans, because it is a fact that even to this day, we don't always know whether somebody is actually friendly or unfriendly, whether somebody's actually joking or sarcastic with us, because we either need to start knowing characters well, whereas the ability of AI is the fact that it can go across a multitude of similar examples and look at the aggregators and what effectively will reflect a certain emotional response from the audience. Now, that, of course, has massive application in marketing, in advertising, in movie making, in documentaries. We can carry on forever. The visual application of AI, in my view, is a massive additional benefit that AI has that is probably far stronger than anything we've had to date. Even the best semiotics professors, even the best analytical people, even the best qualitative research, even as many interviews as you like, could not identify the very subtle differences in the way that people respond. So that for me is a major, major attribute that was added, where the intelligence, as I spoke yesterday, is not sufficient in us as humans, except for the very few, because there are indeed people that can do that. And there really are people that can do that, but they don't always do it right. They don't always do it well. And there are very few that probably are consistent in how they do it. However, the artificial element of intelligence in that sense is able, through pure aggregation across a multitude of applications and the context within which those applications occur, to deduce what that, call it, non-verbal element actually means, and thereby create a character that with big round blinking eyes suggests a human, an incredible, wonderful animal that we all want to hug, even though we know it is really just something that's pixels on a screen. It's nothing more. But it creates a human emotion because of its capability to combine nonverbal elements in a manner that gets certain responses. So again, it's also cause and effect, because it'll also show which ones are more popular than others. It will also show which ones are more numerous than others. So if we look at all of that in combination, that element, in my mind, is a massive, massive contribution of artificial intelligence to human intelligence. Tomorrow we will speak about the next topic, and that is non-observable elements of intelligence, where a lot of it has to rely upon deduction. And that is a very, very much more complex and tricky area, and one where we do not even yet have all the analytical techniques at this point to deduce appropriately. And then we will talk about, the other elements I discussed. So yes, it will get easier down the line. But if we are told that 76% on average, I believe, is the current rate of all marketing or all movie making that we see is based on non-verbal elements of behavior. In other words, the clothing people wear, the way they respond, the way they look, the posture they have, the way they move around, the way they interface with other people, the way they stand in certain conversations. If we are told that 76% is in fact nonverbal and only 14% is effectively what we say, because even in the manner in which we say it, it is more nonverbal than verbal. Now, it's impossible to quantify the 76% accurately ever. It will never really be possible, maybe in 20, 30 years. Because even in the 76%, it remains a function of where we classify a certain behavioral type and how it differs between certain applications and others. So suffice to say, one of the massive, in my view, contributions of artificial intelligence is where the artificial component of intelligence is applied in a manner that gives human expression to inanimate objects and human expression to things that are bizarre. If you look at the Dalek couch that looked like lips, of course he did it for various reasons. Now, to some of us it may be a joke, to others it may be very sensual, to some it may actually be sexual. It doesn't really matter. What artificial intelligence does, it can go across all of that. It can assimilate and it can pull out the elements that are able to generate a certain response from people. Thank you, guys. Have a good week. Bye.